when a 32-year-old journalist who had covered the Prime Minister's office and had uncovered a scam worth millions of dollars was found dead in her home besides her newborn baby, rumors quickly began to fly. Was it her husband? Was it her lover? Or was it a politician? Or was it someone entirely different who had ordered this killing? Let's find out today in the story of Shivani Bhatnagar. Hi, welcome to Collectively Vigilant. I'm Dr. D. If you're new here, please don't forget to hit subscribe. And this is also available in the podcast form for quite a while. And there are already 30 or some episodes out. It's available both on Apple and Spotify. So click on the link down below and you can hear this in the podcast form. However, I must warn you, the podcast is not identical to this video because I host that podcast with the psychologist Sam, and she is clearly not in this video. So if you're looking for identical things, no, it's not going to be identical. It's actually going to be more detailed because she gives the psychological aspects and I, as you know, give the legal and criminological aspect of every crime. So head on there to Spotify and Apple. Right, so now let's start with the story of Shivani Bhatnagar. Now, Shivani Bhatnagar was a 31-year-old chief reporter of the Indian Express newspaper and was a member of the Special Investigations team. Shivani, in fact, is credited to having worked on several exclusive stories, and she was quoted frequently in several newspapers for her work. One of the newspapers actually reported her work in this way. Quote, her report on the biscuit scam highlighted the alleged nexus between the Haryana government's officers and contractors in siphoning off money meant to purchase biscuits for malnourished mothers and their children. A CBI probe was ordered following Shivani Bhatnagar's work, unquote. So, as you can tell, she was doing great work. On January 22nd of 1999, Bhagwan Bhatnagar, who was a relative of Shivani's husband, Rakesh Bhatnagar, was visiting the couple at their apartment, and their apartment number was B42 Navkunj Apartments, and he was visiting these people from where he originally lived, which was in a place called Panchkula, which is in Punjab. So this man is staying over with Rakesh and Shivani Bhatnagar at their home in New Delhi for a couple of days as he was visiting the national capital. So on the day of 22nd of January 1999, he left the home early in the morning around 9 a.m. And at this time, when he leaves at 9 a.m., Rakesh Bhatnagar, the relative whose home he's in, and his wife Shivani and their newborn baby Tanmay, all three of them were still in the apartment. So he leaves at 9, and then Rakesh Bhatnagar, who worked in the legal department of the Times of India, leaves home around 11 a.m. and he reaches work by 12:30 p.m., just around noon. So the only person left in this apartment at this point was, of course, the adult was Shivani and Shivani's baby Tanmay, who was at this point 2 months old. And that's when their household help Veli arrived at the house and started cleaning and cooking, and Veli leaves around 2 p.m. on the 22nd of January in 1999. This left Shivani and her baby after 2 o'clock. Then a man called Mr. Sharma drops by the apartment, and he is supposedly there to give Shivani an invitation to a wedding on behalf of someone called Mr. Adhikari. Now, Shivani receives this person at home, however, doesn't recognize this man. However, what she does is she, of course, calls him home, gives him tea, as is Indian. I mean, of course, as Indians, we give everyone tea. And she, of course, makes this person who's called Mr. Sharma talk to her husband over the phone. Even when Rakesh speaks to this person, he says, well, I don't really recognize who you are. But then Mr. Sharma says, I've come here on behalf of somebody called Mr. Adhikari, who works at the Pioneer newspaper office in Chandigarh. Nonetheless, this person, despite not being able to locate, the family not being able to locate who this person exactly is or who the card is on behalf of, Shivani takes this card and puts it on the table, and this gentleman then leaves. The next thing that we know is that the relative who was staying over at Shivani Bhatnagar's apartment, Swaroop Bhatnagar, comes back around 4:30 p.m. and he tries to open the door. He had an extra key. He tries to open the door, but he can't. So he goes to the nearby phone booth. This, ladies and gentlemen, was 1999. Landline phones were available everywhere in India at this point, but not everybody had a cell phone. So he calls his relative Rakesh Bhatnagar, Shivani's husband, from that phone booth, and then Rakesh Bhatnagar gives him the tip. Right? He says, "Okay, this is how you open this apartment door. You sort of push." Uh, as you're sort of turning the key, make sure to really push the door and at least do it twice. And Rakesh, of course, tells this to the relative over the phone. And finally, around 5:15 p.m. on this day, which is 22nd of January 1999, he is finally able to open that door. And the minute he gets in, he sort of feels a little eerie because there's absolute silence in this apartment. And very quickly, when he looks into the other room, he sees that Shivani is lying deceased on her own bed right next to her newborn baby. So, what the relative Swaroop Bhatnagar does next is he quickly calls Rakesh Bhatnagar from the landline phone, which is in the living room. And Rakesh Bhatnagar rushes over back to his house, and so does one of Rakesh Bhatnagar's colleagues who also worked for Times of India. And a call is placed to the police by 6:13 p.m. on the 22nd of January 1999. By 6:35 p.m., the police actually arrive at the crime scene, and Shivani and Rakesh's apartment, which was in the Patparganj area of Delhi. The police then make a few revelations. The police then looks around the crime scene, and this is what they find. The police found a knife which was lodged in Shivani's neck. There was also another knife which was plunged into her stomach. These knives, in fact, belonged to the Bhatnagars and belonged to the kitchen, which was right next, like few steps away. In total, it seemed like Shivani's body had sustained 10 stab wounds all over her body. In addition to these knife wounds, it seems that she was also strangulated. So, next to Shivani's body, they also find a yellow electrical wire, and it seems like that is the weapon which was used to strangle her. Shivani was rushed to the Dayanand hospital by 7:15 p.m. that night, and this is where she was officially declared dead. However, Rakesh Bhatnagar could not believe that the mother of his newborn child was actually dead. So he insisted that Shivani be taken to the better hospital, which is Apollo Hospital, and they give a decision of whether Shivani can be saved or not. Although the doctors in the Anand hospital could definitely tell that she was gone, and so could everyone who had laid their eyes on her, but still, we are human and we are always clinging to hope. And so was Rakesh Bhatnagar. However, even at Apollo Hospital, she was declared dead. After a few hours, Shivani's autopsy was conducted by Dr. Gupta, and he said the following quote. He said, quote, "I found that she had multiple stab injuries on her chest and her knees. What was striking was the force with which these injuries had been inflicted on her." Then, in the same interview that he had given, he goes on to say, "I had deposed in the court that the tip of the knife, the kitchen knife used in the murder, was found bent inside her body." And then further on, he goes on to state that, quote, "strangulation attempt was so brutal that her windpipe broke, leading to acute asphyxia. Her face had turned blue," unquote. The third injury that apparently Shivani's body had on her was at the back of her head. She was probably hit with a very heavy object. That's what the doctor speculated, Dr. Gupta. And he said that this was likely a skillet, or as we call it in Hindi, a tawa that she was stuck with. And this also was from her own apartment and her own kitchen. And this basically smashed her skull into smithereens. In another article, he basically goes on to say, and the article is from March 19 of 2009, he goes on to say, quote, "I felt that the woman was murdered 3 times over," unquote. During this investigation, the police found that whoever had entered Shivani's home certainly could not have been a stranger. What supported this theory was the fact that at the crime scene, the police found 2 cups of tea and remnant of some snacks on the coffee table in the living room. The 2 empty glasses were right next to a box of confectionaries which were still on the dining table. On top of all this, it seems like whoever had murdered Shivani was looking for something in particular because her entire house was in complete disarray. The 3 bedrooms were in complete shambles and everything was upside down. Rakesh, as you remember, Shivani's husband, said that Shivani's camera and her gold chain were definitely missing from the apartment, amongst other things. At that point, he was under so much stress, he couldn't even recall, as he was looking around, what was actually missing. The police lifted around 10 fingerprints from various articles in the house that they speculated the perpetrator would have touched. The police also checked the entry registry of the apartment building where the guards kept a log of people who would visit the apartment at which time and which apartment number. It seemed that the person in question that the police was looking for, at this point this person was a suspect or a person of interest, was a person who had entered the apartment at 2:40 p.m. and had registered his name falsely as Rajiv Bhatnagar, and he had listed his sort of residential address as 311 Tribune Colony, Chandigarh. According to the address book, this person exited the building at 3:10 p.m. And remember, Shivani had actually spoken to her husband around 3:30 p.m. So it did seem like this person was just a person of interest. Maybe he saw someone because she had clearly spoken to her husband around 3:30. So there were 2 more entries of people who had entered Shivani's apartment on this particular day. One was a man called Lalit, and then another man was a man called Vasuluddin who had entered the apartment to drop off the dry cleaning, and the family knew this person. But as you know, when you enter in any apartment anywhere in India, I speculate, I've been to multiple apartments in Delhi, that's where I'm from. So one could literally write any name and you could write it in the shoddiest handwriting, and nobody would actually know what your real name is because identity is not usually checked by the guard of different apartment buildings. And similarly, these names could have been not the real names of these people. So according to the police and the medical examiner who had conducted the autopsy on Shivani's body, it seemed like Shivani was killed between the hours of 3:30 p.m. and 5 p.m. on that dreadful January day in 1999. The police verified the information, which was logged into the visitors' records, and they were able to trace that the actual apartment that somebody had written that they were visiting from in Chandigarh was a real apartment building, but there was no one called a Mr. Sharma or a Mr. Adhikari who lived there. The police actually thought that Shivani's husband Rakesh might be the person who would have killed Shivani. And as consumers of true crime, you and I know that the first suspicion always falls on the person who's closest to the victim. And in the ensuing years, Rakesh Bhatnagar was actually questioned by the police several times. And when I say several, I mean 70 times. The cell phone that he shared with Shivani was searched for details. Cell phones were not very common in January of 1999 when Shivani was murdered. But these 2 people being journalists, Shivani was a journalist, her husband worked in the legal department of the Times of India. They actually had a cell phone. So that cell phone was extensively mined for whatever data they could find by 1999 Delhi police standards. The police was also looking for extramarital affairs that Rakesh might be having, and they were trying to figure out if he had ever been unfaithful towards his wife Shivani. However, it turns out that Rakesh was not the unfaithful one, Shivani was. Again, the police thought that if Rakesh had come to know that Shivani had cheated on him, he might have flew into a rage and killed his own wife. In a later interview, Rakesh Bhatnagar expressed his frustration on being looked at as the primary suspect in the murder of his wife. He said that in those years he could not spend any time with his newborn baby Tanmay, and many people close to the family said that Shivani and Rakesh would fight quite often, but despite all the digging that the police did and the 70 interviews, they could never link Rakesh Bhatnagar with the killing of Shivani. And that's when they started talking to Shivani's sister Sevanti. And Sevanti disclosed to the police that Shivani was indeed having an affair with a man called R.K. Sharma, who was in fact an IAS officer, which means he was a bureaucrat. Shivani had disclosed this information to her own sister when her baby Tanmay was born in the hospital. And she confided in her sister that R.K. Sharma had been avoiding Shivani's phone calls ever since she had given birth. And Shivani had actually requested her own sister Sevanti to call R.K. Sharma, the bureaucrat, at his residence and inform him that her baby Tanmay was born. So the natural question that is in everyone's mind right now, as you hear the narrative so far, is Shivani's baby Tanmay R.K. Sharma's baby? Is that why she was trying to inform him that the baby was here? Well, the short answer to that is, according to everything that I've read in this case, it doesn't seem to be the case. So Shivani had also informed her sister Sevanti that R.K. Sharma had ceased all contact with her because Shivani herself had threatened him that she would expose him and ruin his career as a bureaucrat. More details of this affair basically came to light, and the police also spoke not only to Shivani's sister Sevanti, but they also spoke to a woman who was also a journalist, a woman by the name of Sejal Shah, who was Shivani's roommate in London. Shivani was in fact in the UK for a span of like 3 months because Shivani had a scholarship to study journalism for a short period of time in the UK, and at that point Sejal was actually Shivani's roommate. And that's when she had overheard Shivani and R.K. Sharma speaking for hours. You remember, this was the 1990s. Calls were not calls over the internet, so they were not cheap. And R.K. Sharma would frequently call Shivani and Shivani would frequently call R.K. Sharma. Interestingly enough, it seems like Shivani had told Sejal that R.K. Sharma was in fact very scared of his wife, and he thought that he was really scared that his wife would someday come to know that he was having an affair with Shivani. So all this detail is coming to light months after Shivani's murder. Then Sejal goes on to say that about a month after their training, Sejal recalls that Shivani had told her that she was in fact having an affair with R.K. Sharma, and that Shivani was very upset when she found out that she was pregnant. In the 3 months that she was in London, Shivani in fact flew back and forth several times, and Sejal in fact asked Shivani, "You are a journalist, just a journalist. How can you afford to go back and forth several times over a short period of time, so many times? Like, the airfare is still expensive and was quite expensive back in 1999 as well." And to that, Shivani one day said, quote, "I have a close friend in Indian Air who fixes tickets for me," unquote. As you can guess, she was getting these tickets from this person called Ravikant. And Ravikant Sharma was not only working in Air India at this time, ladies and gentlemen, he was the Vigilance director. So he was actually headquartered in Mumbai, between the years of 1998 and the year 2000, and he oversaw all of Air India. So when did their affair start? Their affair began in the year 1997 when Shivani Bhatnagar, at that time was Shivani Kumar, and was in charge of covering the Prime Minister's office under the government of Inder Kumar Gujral, who was the then Prime Minister. Ravikant Sharma was a bureaucrat who was on a special duty around this time. Since the end of 1998, ever since she had become a mother, she was only a mother for 3 months before she was murdered. She complained to her confidants that R.K. Sharma was basically not responding to her calls, and he was maintaining a distance between himself and Shivani, and this really upset her, and she was trying to get back at him by threatening to expose him in the media. Shivani wanted R.K. Sharma to divorce his wife and marry Shivani instead. But Ravikant Sharma was unwilling to do that, and the police also alleged that R.K. Sharma, of course, because of what was at stake, had masterminded the killing of Shivani to get rid of her. Now, R.K. Sharma was an extremely well-respected bureaucrat, and he had cleared what has been found to be one of the world's hardest examination, which is the Indian Administrative Services exam. And he was revered as a bureaucrat. He was put in charge of several vigilance departments. He was at one point the vigilance director for the Anti-Narcotics Tribunal, the Anti-Corruption Tribunal. He was also at one point overseeing all of India's Department of Finance in some capacity. He was an officer who was also sent by India several times to the Interpol so that he could learn and then implement those things in India. He was the Indian officer sent several times to Interpol conferences, including the one in France. He was also sent by the government of India to Canada to attend short-term courses which were run by the United Nations between the year 1992 to 1995. He worked in France and then headed India's Interpol response unit. In 2001, he was in charge of all the prisons of the state of Haryana. Shivani was apparently in love with R.K. Sharma, Ravikant Sharma, and Ravikant, in fact, the word Ravikant was in fact her password for her email account at her workplace, which was the illustrious Indian newspaper, the Indian Express. So the police zero in on R.K. Sharma by analyzing his ingoing and outgoing calls in the months leading up to Shivani's death, Shivani's murder, I should say. And it seemed like they had called each other several times, numerous times, and at least there were 90 calls which were accounted for, and 170 calls that Shivani had made to R.K. Sharma. Some family members of the victim, Shivani, said that the Shivani was in fact getting life-threatening calls from someone, and ultimately before her murder in 1999, she was getting these calls for months on end. However, one doesn't know if these calls were being sort of made to her because of the investigative work that she was doing, or was it because of her personal life? Interestingly enough, the police also found a mobile number and 2 landline numbers that belonged to R.K. Sharma in the call records of who was calling Shivani. Interestingly enough, Rakesh Bhatnagar had spoken to his own wife's lover more than 40 times between December of 1997 and January of 1999. But the police was not able to ascertain what transpired on these calls between the victim's husband and the victim's lover. The police also found a mobile number and 2 landline numbers that belonged to R.K. Sharma, the lover, and upon probing further, they found that this number was registered to someone called Bhagwan Sharma. The crime branch head of Delhi, Mr. U.K. Katana is his name, or he was the head of crime branch at that point, informed the court that the phone had been disconnected the very day that Shivani Bhatnagar was murdered. The police also found 2 numbers belonging to a person by the name of Pradeep Sharma and another man called Satya Prakash Sharma. By the way, just in case you're someone who is not familiar with Indian family names, the family name Sharma or the surname Sharma is exceptionally common in North India. So there are all these Sharmas, but are all the Sharmas related to each other? One can't really say just because their family names match. It's basically, Sharma is the equivalent of being a smith. It's super common. The police found that there were people who were in fact interacting with a particular cell phone which was in Pune with a few cell phones in Delhi. And remember, Shivani was killed in January of 1999 and cell phones were quite the rarity back then. So the police in the city of Pune, which is in Maharashtra, figured out that the phone which was interacting with this Patparganj area of Delhi phone, there were some phones interacting with the one in Pune, and they found that that particular phone, which was in Pune at that point, in fact belonged to R.K. Sharma's friend, a man by the name of Suresh Kukreja. When the police found Suresh, they spoke to him about his phone interacting with several numbers in the national capital area, and he immediately informs the police that his friend R.K. Sharma was the one who was using his phone around the time of Shivani's murder. Then the police, of course, looked into the alibi that R.K. Sharma had given, because they were trying to figure out if he had masterminded this killing. And the alibi R.K. Sharma had presented to the police upon being questioned about his whereabouts at the time of Shivani's murder were in fact in Pune. Around this time of Shivani's murder, he does agree that he does tell the police that he did take and borrowed Suresh Kukreja's phone, and he did receive a number of calls from New Delhi. However, that doesn't mean that he killed the woman, right? Anybody could call, and especially a person like that who's a high-flying bureaucrat. I'm sure these kind of people get millions of phone calls every day, right? So that doesn't mean that he was the one who had masterminded this whole killing, but then the police were trying to put two and two together to figure out if he was in fact that person. So in this whole thing, the first arrests were made on the 30th of July of 2002. And might I remind you, Shivani was actually murdered in January of 1999. So by Indian standards, this is not super slow. It's quite the pace of investigation. So the first arrest was made of a man by the name of Bhagwan Sharma on August 1st of 2002. On literally the same day. Okay? Literally one day after Shri Bhagwan Sharma gets arrested, R.K. Sharma took leave of absence and went on a 10-day long vacation. And remember, at this point, he was the head of all the jails of Haryana. So without informing anyone, he suddenly goes on this 10-day vacation. And then the police find that R.K. Sharma in fact does have a connection with the person that they have arrested. Shri Bhagwan Sharma, I know it's confusing because everyone seems to be a Sharma, but Shri Bhagwan, the person that they had arrested, was the son of the SHO, which is the station house officer that R.K. Sharma used to work with, the bureaucrat used to work with. By the way, an SHO is a station house officer. He's basically in charge of a whole police station, and he's responsible for maintaining law and order situation in that particular jurisdiction. So the person that they arrested was the son of this person who was closely always working with R.K. Sharma, okay, the bureaucrat. Once they arrest Shri Bhagwan, he discloses to the police that on January 13 of 1999, he was in fact at the Ashoka Hotel in Delhi, where Shivani's murder plot was hatched by R.K. Sharma, the bureaucrat. Apparently, Shri Bhagwan was in the hotel along with 3 other men with the same name, Sharma, with 3 men with the same family name. So there was a man called Satya Prakash, Ved Prakash and Dev Prakash, and these 3 men were there when Shri Bhagwan was also called at the Ashoka Hotel in Delhi by the bureaucrat R.K. Sharma. R.K. Sharma was meeting Shivani on that day, and he wanted all these men to be able to visually identify what Shivani looked like and remember her face. He spills these beans as he's interrogated by the police. And then when R.K. Sharma, of course he was a bureaucrat, very well placed, so he knew where things were going. And the minute he gets wind of this, he basically, takes off on a 10-day vacation, does not return. That 10-day becomes a much longer period of time. And then the police is basically forced to put this man's photo in several newspapers around the country, where they declare a reward of 50,000 rupees for anyone who would basically tell the police about the whereabouts of R.K. Sharma, the bureaucrat. And the police and the media more than the police, start visiting the bureaucrat's family at their family home. And that's when his wife Madhu Sharma and 2 of his daughters, his conference where Madhu, the wife, spoke to the media in a belligerent fashion and yelled at them and told them that her husband was absolutely innocent and he was being scapegoated by someone who was in power. And it's in this media interview, when she calls that press conference, that she basically goes on to say that R.K. Sharma was being scapegoated because he in fact knew about the real person who Shivani was having an affair with. And then she alleges in that news conference that Shivani was actually not having an affair with R.K. Sharma, the bureaucrat. Shivani was in fact having an affair with the Minister of Broadcasting, Pramod Mahajan.
His phone calls were all checked. Why aren't the phone calls being made public? I want to ask this. मैं बोल रही हूँ प्रमोद महाजन ने किया, जाओ पूछो प्रमोद महाजन से.
And then she doesn't stop there, and she says that the people in power got Shivani killed, not her husband. And she even goes on to say that at one point, do you remember L.K. Advani was the Deputy Prime Minister of India? She says, quote, "My husband is exactly where Pramod Mahajan used to meet Shivani Bhatnagar," unquote. She further states in this press conference that Pramod Mahajan spoke to Shivani on the day of her murder for about 45 minutes, and all the evidence that the police say they have is all fabricated on the behest of the Deputy Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister L.K. Advani and the Broadcasting Minister Pramod Mahajan. By the way, R.K. Sharma's wife Madhu, in the same press conference, also alleges that Shivani had a diary, and in that diary was Pramod Mahajan, the Information Minister's, Broadcasting Minister's personal phone number. She also alleged that all the people in power were also trying to get her killed and her two daughters killed. And the inflammatory sort of these statements that she was making, she went on to say one more thing. She said to the media that they should get a paternity test done on Shivani's child, because she alleged that that was the love child of the then minister Pramod Mahajan. She even demanded that the minister should take a lie detector test, and that's when, after all these allegations, the probe into Shivani's murder was actually transferred by the Delhi police to the Central Board of Investigation, the CBI. In response to all these allegations, Pramod Mahajan, who was the then minister, said that he had absolutely no relations with the journalist, and he said that thousands of journalists basically approach him all the time for getting bits of information. That does not mean that he was having an affair with all of them. And he said that he was happy to prove whatever tests that the police would demand that he would, happy to clear his name. At this point, Madhu, the bureaucrat's wife, was not the only one who was saying this. A lot of Shivani's ex-colleagues from different newspapers also alleged that Shivani herself had boasted to them several times that she had very close ties with Pramod Mahajan, and she had also told her friends frequently in the UK that she called Pramod Mahajan all the time. On August 16 of 2002, the police said that the Information and Broadcasting Minister Pramod Mahajan was in fact not a suspect or a person of interest, and they went on to arrest, as I said, Satya Prakash, Ved Prakash and Dev Prakash. After weeks of being on the run, the police seized the property of R.K. Sharma and his family. And remember that these people were bureaucrats. So R.K. Sharma was a bureaucrat and he was living in government housing. In September of 2002, finally, R.K. Sharma basically surrendered himself. Then, 1 month later, in the month of October, R.K. Sharma wrote a confession in which he said that he was in fact the mastermind of the killing of Shivani, along with Dev Prakash, Ved Prakash and Satya Prakash. So the person who actually killed Shivani on that January afternoon was a man by the name of Pradeep Sharma. So there are different media reports about this, and some media reports say that Shivani was pissed off that R.K. Sharma was maintaining his distance with Shivani. And apparently she was really pissed off that he had not even congratulated her on the birth of her son. And what she was actually threatening to do was not just to reveal her affair with the bureaucrat, What she was actually threatening to do was to tell the world that he was in fact her source for most of the stories that she was getting about the government and about all these corrupt scams. So corruptions, all sorts of scams. So he was the person that she was who was revealing all this information to her. R.K. Sharma was in fact, Shivani said that R.K. Sharma was in fact the source for the stories that she had published about the St. Kitts banking scandal, which involved the previous prime minister of the country's son. So, the previous prime minister was VP Singh, and his son Agyay Singh apparently opened an account in which he pilfered 20, money worth $21 million, which was black money pilfered from the Indian coffers and put into his personal bank account in the St. Kitts Island. Shivani was threatening to tell everyone that Sharma was in fact the whistleblower who had handed over sensitive government documents to her, and she was basically pressurizing him to continue the affair between them. Satya Prakash was hired by a man called Pradeep Sharma with the promise to get a job in Haryana's Urban Development Corporation, and he would also, for the killing of Shivani, get 300,000 rupees. The prosecution apparently also found pictures of R.K. Sharma and Satya Prakash together, where they were where they were inaugurating a rural school together. And it seems like this is how it went. So on 21st of January 1999, it was initially decided that this would be the day of Shivani's murder. However, her murder had to be deferred on this day because Shivani was not available at her apartment on this day. So she got to live a little more because she had some urgent work, because of which she had to step out of her apartment. On January 24 of 1999, Pradeep went into Shivani's home pretending that, on the pretext of giving her an invitation card, and he had brought some sweets. As you know, in Indian weddings, when we get invitations, it's not just a dry invitation, we always get something to eat with it. And he went into this house with the pretext of giving this invitation card, and that's when he also took a yellow electrical wire with him. That's when he gets into her apartment, he sits there with her, drinks her tea, places this invitation card on the table, and later he strangles her. And just so that he could completely make sure that Shivani would not get up, he also stabs her. He then leaves Navkunj apartment, and then he calls up Bhagwan Sharma, and all three of these men then leave Delhi and make their way towards Maharashtra. And that's when they're given 300,000 rupees in Hotel Milan. When he was first questioned, a person by the name of Kukreja, whose phone was used by the bureaucrat, corresponded with what had happened because he just happened to be there at that time. The police later on was able to find the missing camera and the missing gold chain from the homes of one of these killers. All of the 10 fingerprints that the police had taken from the crime scene, fact, was also checked against the prints of these men. So, all these people were then taken into custody. Upon his arrest, Pradeep Sharma, in the court proceedings, alleged that the whole evidence was actually cooked up and fabricated by the police, and that the police had faked his name into a visitor's log, and he had never even been to that apartment. However, the case began in 2003 and went on till 2008. R.K. Sharma, the bureaucrat, and all the others were then given life imprisonment by the session courts of Delhi. The trial court alleged that R.K. Sharma was the main mastermind, but keeping his excellent work record in mind, they did not sentence him to death. 2 out of the 4 men who had peripheral knowledge of this murder were acquitted in this court case, which basically started in 2003 and ended in 2008. In 2011, the Delhi High Court said that there was not enough evidence against Pradeep Sharma to secure a life in sentence for him. And then the court also, in their statement, said that the call records are not to be fully trusted because the technology in 1999 was not where it was by the time the case had actually gone to trial between the years of 2003 to 2008. So on December 21st of 2010, the Delhi High Court reserved its judgment on appeals of R.K. Sharma and his co-convicts. On January 12 of 2011, which was 1 year later, the High Court acquitted R.K. Sharma of his work in this whole case. However, they did give Sri Bhagwan and Satya Prakash and Pradeep Sharma's sentences. So remember, all these people were initially held for the murder of Shivani. However, the High Court of Delhi says that he had not done it and he was acquitted of all charges. The judge apparently said, "Court, did Pradeep act alone? Did he act on behest of R.K. Sharma, or did he act at the interest of someone else?" These are all questions we can't answer on the basis of the material provided to us, unquote. Then he goes on to say, further in his judgment, the judge says, quote, "Judges are like human beings. We have suspicions. But judges, unlike others who are free to arrive at their own conclusions, cannot and do not convict people on mere suspicion," unquote. So the court ordered the release of R.K. Sharma, the bureaucrat, in jail after he had spent 9 years in prison for the killing of Shivani. After he was acquitted of these charges, he steps out of jail and then he gives an interview to Headlines Today where he expresses his opinion and he says that he would like to write a book about his whole experience of being in jail. And then RK Sharma also says, quote, "I'm a different person with different experiences. I have seen a different India there," unquote. In the same statement, he goes on to say that he now lives a quiet life and he does not believe, quote, in probing the past and has moved on with life, unquote. He says, further in the same interview that he gave to Headlines Today, he says, "The court has given me my life again," unquote. Right. So this brings us to the end of the narrative of what happened to Shivani Bhatnagar. There is still some who truly believe that R.K. Sharma did not do this. And the High Court of Delhi has clearly acquitted him of these charges after he had spent a substantial period of time in the jail. The next thing that we know is some people still speculate that the late minister Pramod Mahajan had a hand in the killing of Shivani. For that, you will have to come back again because I have another video coming about the killing of Pramod Mahajan, and that was, ladies and gentlemen, also a murder. So these two cases are spliced together in ways that are not very clear in this episode but will come up in the next episode. So if one was to criminologically try to analyze this case, I of course run into this problem because who we thought the criminal is, the one who actually spent about 7 years in jail for the murder of Shivani Bhatnagar, was then later acquitted by the High Court of Delhi. So we can only speculate that he's the killer. Or did the legal system fail Shivani and place him outside of custody when he should still be in custody? So one doesn't really know that was Shivani truly killed by R.K. Sharma. If one was to take it for granted that that's exactly the person who killed her, then clearly the motive in this case was the fact that Shivani seemed to be getting on R.K. Sharma's nerves, and also the fact that she was threatening to expose him. It does seem like he wanted to get rid of her to make his political journey and his bureaucratic journey smoother. She, in fact, seems to be the kind of person who was a really good investigative journalist who did uncover parts of the biscuit scam, amongst others. She was proficient enough, so good that she was placed by her newspaper to the Prime Minister's office, which is supposed to be the most important one. So, if it's truly the case that he was the mastermind of this killing, then the motives seem to be rather transparent. If it's the case that he was not and someone else got her killed, then what is one to even speculate about, because we don't even know who got her killed. So in this case, I'm not very sure what I should speculate about, because at least in most of our cases, we know who did it, why they did it. So it's very easy to understand that from a criminological point of view. Here, the legal system has made this case murky in the aftermath of first holding this person responsible. So I'm going to hold my speculation in this case. However, I will hold my analysis, criminological analysis in this case. However, I will come back to criminological analysis in the murder of Pramod Mahajan, who many people claim was the one who got Shivani Bhatnagar murdered. So stay tuned for that episode. And as we always say, on our YouTube channel and also on the podcast, we can give each other so much more than our thoughts and prayers. We can give each other our collective vigilance. So until I see you again, stay collectively vigilant and hear us on Apple and Spotify, and also like and subscribe